What's up, everybody? Welcome to Brian Mansell Show. As always, I'm your host, Brian Mansell, and we got to talk about week 2. There's no debate here. There is no stalling. We're going straight into week 2 because last week was just a taste of how insane this season could potentially be. We talked about potential surprise teams. We definitely got a few of them. One of them being the Colts. One of the reasons why my record last week ended up being 9-5 was because of the Colts. But this is what week 1's all about. This is where we start getting some pretenders and some teams that are actually surprising and could make a playoff run. So we kind of got a good glimpse of that. But this week, we got to look into who's going to maintain that pattern. Was it just a one-game situation? Let's see how these teams kind of shake out. Before we do that, make sure you guys have liked, subscribed, and you've also turned on notifications so that you don't miss any of the other content we have coming out, not only on YouTube, but also on all the social medias, on TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, all pretty much the same handles side of Instagram, which is BAMansell_, and also on X at BAMansell. Everything will be scrolling on the bottom throughout the video, so you guys can follow the social links. You have plenty of time throughout the video to do so. But without further ado, let's get into week 2 predictions. Starting off first with Cleveland and Baltimore. Now, people are kind of underappreciating this game a little bit. The Browns and the Ravens are both 0-1 to start the year. Browns took a really good Bengals team to the wire in week 1, but we all know the trend. Typically, Cincinnati doesn't play well in the first week of the year. And for Baltimore, they're coming off a really bad loss against Buffalo. Not because it was a blowout, because it wasn't. It was really close. It was the fact that they had a 15-point lead and dominated the Bills all game on the ground, through the air, every way possible on offense, but still blew a 15-point lead with under 5 to go in the game. And so they're reeling and they're angry because they felt they should have won that game. And so they're going to have to take that anger out against this Cleveland team in their home stadium in Baltimore. So we're expecting Baltimore to really beat them down here, but it is quite important to note a couple of things. One, for the Browns, they're not going to have Quinshon Judkins probably, only because he still may not be at that point yet where he's ready to play, because they still have to ramp him up because he's kind of spent some time away from the game due to his contract situation. Mike Hall will be out for this game, so they will not have their defensive tackle, and they will also be potentially missing one of their offensive linemen, Jack Conklin, at right tackle due to an eye injury. So there could be potential that they could be losing their right tackle for this game on top of maybe not having Judkins. So some things to notice there. And then for Baltimore on their side, I think Patrick Card's out again, and Isaiah Likely will also not be playing in this game, their backup tight end. So a couple more significant losses there for Baltimore. But going into this game, there's a couple things you have to look at when it comes to the Browns and the Ravens. So first off, the Browns, passing-wise, were not very good last week against the Bengals, which is kind of expected. We don't expect much from this Cleveland offense to be necessarily dominant in any way with Joe Flacco. But against this team like this with Baltimore, whose secondary kind of really struggled, but it was against an MVP caliber offense and with a reigning MVP on their team in Josh Allen. So I think we're holding Baltimore too high of a standard here based off how they performed last week. So when I read that they're ranked 28th as pass defense in passing efficiency, that's a little bit, no, I'm not really a fan of that. So when I'm reading metrics saying that the Browns are favored in this factor, I think that's absolutely incorrect, because it's not taking into account that it's only been one game, that there's other games still to go. Baltimore had a bad game defensively. I get it. This is their rebound game. We're definitely going to see that. On the ground, I mean, there was nothing Buffalo could do to stop the Baltimore run game. And with Mike Hall still being out for the Browns, I don't think it's going to get any easier this week for Cleveland. This should be a tough game. Although, they did pretty much shut down the Bengals running offense last week with Chase Brown. So, who knows? Who knows? This could be a potential toss-up on the ground. But in terms of actually getting pressure, getting to the quarterback, creating problems, Baltimore's gotten a lot better in that area. The Browns, still pretty good in that factor because they have Myles Garrett on their team. But outside of Garrett, they're still struggling with some pressure issues. So they're going to have to work a couple things out there, iron those little mistakes out, and just hopefully get back to this dominant form we've been expecting of them for the last couple of years, at least in the pass rushing aspect. For Baltimore, this should be pretty easy. I don't know how else to put it. I think also you look into this game and every which angle, you try to find a way to see Cleveland win. I don't see that path right now. I do have Baltimore winning this game pretty easily. But again, anything could happen. And I will say, if Baltimore does find a way to lose this game and go 0-2, it might be time to hit the panic button in Baltimore, because that's going to be very, very scary moment for them. It's early still, but they're going to have to do a lot to right the ship right away because they're going to have to get back on track fast. Let's go to the next game. We're going to stay in the AFC North action. We're going to go to Cincinnati, where they're going to be taking on the Jaguars in what should be a very highly anticipated matchup between two teams who actually won in Week 1. Bengals barely, but the Jaguars looking extremely dominant against Carolina last week. Now, the Jaguars will be without Wyatt Millam again this week, as well as potentially Monteric Brown, one of their corners. He was been limited in practice. They see him to be doubtful right now, so he's probably not going to play. But Millam being one of their O-linemen who kind of rotates in every now and then, he's going to, a rookie at that. It's going to be a little bit of a tough moment for him. We'll see when he finally gets some action on the field, but I'm looking forward to seeing him do a lot more work now when he comes back, because he's a huge part of this Jaguars offensive line going forward. Now, we look at what happened last week between both teams and just take a look at the basic numbers. So, passing-wise, even though they were going against the Carolina defense that supposedly revamped their secondary, the Jaguars did pretty well, ending up at around middle of the pack in terms of passing efficiency. For Bengals defense, they did really well against this Browns passing offense that really couldn't get the ball going really in any direction. Even on the ground, they struggled a bit. So, for Cincinnati, it was a good showing for them, and they're favored in this metric by the NFL. But I do think that Jacksonville could have a better time than anticipated. I've had questions about their secondary all offseason. They showed out really well against Cleveland, but can they carry that against the Jacksonville offense that's hoping to build further with the amount of weapons they got? I mean, you're talking having Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter as the two receivers is much different than going up against Jerry Jeudy and Xavier Tillman, or Cedric Tillman. I forget his name. I believe it was Cedric Tillman. Between Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy. Completely different offenses here. And it's different QB play. So we'll see how that kind of shakes out. In terms of ground game, though, Jacksonville was insane last week. Travis Etienne looked like a star once again. Looked like he looked like he was exactly why they drafted him, and how good he was literally that game. I can't explain enough to you how impressive it was to see Etienne make this resurgence. Got 143 rushing yards and an extra 69 rushing yards over his expected mark on 16 carries last week. That's such a big deal, because last year he finished with under the 43 yards. So he finished with less rushing yards than were expected of him before the season started. He's already well over that mark early, which is great. So we'll see if he can maintain that against the Cincinnati defense that did pretty well stopping the run last week against Cleveland. And in terms of getting pressure, let me tell you, this Jaguar defense can definitely get some pressure. They showed a lot of good stuff against Carolina, who supposedly retooled their O-line. And if that is the case, and Jaguars still got the pressure they did, this could be a rough night for Burrow. This could be a rough day. We don't know, though. I think for right now, I'm going to go ahead and rock with the Bengals on this. But I'm not 100% sold. I need you guys to know that. I'm not 100% sold. This could easily be an upset alert game. I'm not 100% locked in yet. I just want you guys to know that. I like what I'm seeing from Jacksonville on offense, but I'm unsure if their secondary can hold down this Bengals defense. One interesting note, though, they're going to increase the snaps for Hunter on defense this week because they're up against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so we'll see if that makes any impact as well. So I do have the Bengals winning, but don't be surprised if the Jaguars get the upset. Let's go to the next game. Two teams that lost last week, both in disappointing fashion. Giants versus the Cowboys. They'll be in Dallas at 1 o'clock. Yeah, Giants had a really hard time last week with blocking. You look at the advanced metrics there. Every time Russell Wilson was under pressure, he was under pressure a lot. He had less than 1.9 seconds on average to throw. When he was blitzed, he was under a lot of pressure. When it was a 4-man rush, he was under a lot of pressure. The O-line really created a lot of problems for this offense and stunted their passing capabilities. So that's unfortunate. Hopefully this week they can kick that trend. They're up against Dallas, who's coming off a rough game against Philly, where the game was practically in their hands a couple times, and they just couldn't get the job done and put the game away to get one over on Philly. So that's unfortunate. Looking at the offenses so far, passing efficiencies and everything, we look at the Cowboy side. They are ranked in the middle ground area currently passing-wise, which makes sense. You're up against Philly's defense, and their secondary is supposed to be very good. So if you rank higher than like around middle of the pack after going up a really good secondary like that, I can totally see where Dallas is looking a lot better than people anticipate offensively. The Giants' defense in the secondary area, defensively, they really had a hard time against Washington. and they did allow a lot more catches than anticipated. And a lot of that came to because they didn't call a lot of blitzes. When they did blitz, they were really effective against Jaden Daniels. It was very, very evident. But when they were not using blitzes, they were just rushing 4. That was where the problems began. Because when they only rushed 4, Jaden had perfect amount of time to get through his reads and get the throws off. Dude was exceptional when he wasn't under pressure. So the key for the Giants this week is you got to build pressure. And if Dak is under pressure, I expect him to be making a lot of mistakes. So that's pretty much well said for any quarterback. Not many of them are so super cool and collected when under a lot of pressure. So in this case, I really want to see the Giants integrate Abdul Carter in a lot more and get more done in that aspect, because I think that's the key to really winning this year and getting some games. You got to get the defense more involved in blitzes. Increase the rate. You should be at like Tampa Bay's level of blitzes. Like they blitz a lot. That's where you kind of have to be for the Giants defense. You have to be willing to accept that. It doesn't help that their base set isn't necessarily how it should be. They're at a 3-4. I think a 4-3 is more beneficial, but I digress. It's not my team. It's not my defense. It's not my offense. It's Bowen's defense. It's Kafka and Dable's offense. I'm not going to get involved in that. That's their decisions. Rushing wise, Dallas, pretty good on the ground last week, I have to say. They did look really good with Javonte Williams. He was super unexpected to see how well he played on the ground. So we'll see how that does against the Giants defense, who could not stop the run at all last week. They had a really hard time with run stopping. They ended up ranking 28th because there was so many issues going on trying to slow down both Eckler, Krosky Merritt, McNichols, and then on top of that, a running Jaden Daniels. And we know Dak's not a runner, but if need be, they just need to focus on keeping Javonte from bouncing in, because he's more of an inside runner. Jaden Blue will bounce outside and hurt you that way too. So you got to keep an eye on both. If the Giants can stop that, maybe that changes things for them. And then the pressure rate, Giants just were not getting a lot of pressure as they should have. And the Cowboys weren't really allowing a lot of pressure. So, I mean, right now, everything looks like it's pointing in Dallas's favor at the moment. And if you really think about it right now, the biggest stat I love when I read about why I have the Cowboys winning this game, because I'm going to just say it, Dallas is winning this game. Giants are probably going to lose this game. The reason being this one stat alone, which again, it's a rough stat, but it's a true stat. Giants defense allowed 59% of their deep passes faced to be completed just last season. And that's the highest rate by defense in a season since 2016. Not in the Giants franchise stories since 2016. Like the most the franchise has let up. It's the most in the NFL. That's the highest rate in the NFL since in the last 9 years. To me, that's unacceptable. And they didn't do too much to really revamp the secondary. They did have Paulson Adebo, who did play pretty well. I can say that much for the Giants. But outside of that, the secondary still has that problem. And if the Cowboys have Lamb and Pickens working together here, it's going to be a long day for the Giants. And I think it will be. I think Dallas is going to probably rout the Giants here. Let's go to the Bears and the Lions. We're going to the NFC North here, where it'll be going to Ford Field in Detroit. Both teams coming off a loss last week. Bears blew a lead, had a really good start to the game, quickly squandered it. And then with the Lions case, they just couldn't get that offense going against a Green Bay defense, which if you watched the Thursday night game, you already know that it's probably the best defense in the NFL. So with that in mind, I'm not going to completely say Detroit's offense looks terrible. What I will say is I do think that Detroit has a potential leg up in this game, and the only reason I could say that is because their pass defense did not do well against Green Bay, but it's also the Bears' offense is still out of sync. They game plan well for the first quarter or so, their first set of drives, but when defense starts making adjustments, the offense has already shown they're not doing well in responding to those adjustments. So the Bears have to figure out a way to put out a game plan in place where, yeah, you have your set plays. These things are what you're going to work against, this kind of stuff. If they start to change, you have to anticipate the changes. So if they adjust to be like, let's say you're running really well with some more corner combinations, with some hook routes underneath. I mean, if that's doing really well in your midfield, in your half-field concepts, that's great. But if they adjust to start picking up on both of them to make it so it's almost like a zone coverage deep to make sure there's no wedge in between, or they start running man out there, and then on the hook concept, they're just keeping the linebacker up front to take him down quick to avoid any big yards, you got to change the game plan, have a change up here. So let's say you were supposed to run a corner here on man-to-man. Instead of doing the corner, you got to change it up to a quick out route. Anything out there. So like instead of doing like a 5-step out, do like a 10-step. So you go about 8-10 yards out instead of doing like an 8-yard and then break up the corner or a post. I mean, that's the kind of the points I'm trying to make here. You got to be ready to make those adjustments in the event they make any of these changes you start to notice. And if the offense is unable to do that, the Bears are just going to get stifled all game. And that was a big part of what I was seeing offensively with the woes with the Bears. Now, defensively for the Bears, they're getting most of their guys back. So they're going to be a lot healthier. I think as of right now, Kyler Gordon is the only player that's not going to play this week for the Bears in the secondary. He should be the only one that doesn't go, which is great news because they need all the help they can get. And for Detroit, they really want to put last week's game in the past. And I think they can do that. And I think Detroit will probably win this game. And I think it's not because Caleb's going to be bad. It's not because I think the offense is going to be out of sync. I think it's simply going to be because the Lions offense is going to be coming out angry. And in terms of run defense, I don't expect the Bears run defense to be able to stop the combination of Gibbs and Montgomery this week. I don't expect to see it. So I do have Detroit winning this game. And Goff had plenty of time to throw too. Against the Packers, I think he was averaging about 3 seconds to throw per snap. So that per passing snap, that is. So that's kind of a good thing for them. And if the Bears are going to struggle to get that pressure in, he's going to have even more time to throw. And keep in mind, the Packers were getting a lot of pressure. So they were getting a lot of pressure, and yet Goff still had 3 seconds to throw. That tells you all you need to know. So if the Bears can't do it, he's going to have 4 seconds. And that's way too much time. So I do expect Detroit to probably win this game, but Chicago might give up more fight than we want to think. Let's look at New England, Miami, AFC East rivalry matchup. Both teams 0-1. Patriots with a surprising 0-1 loss to the Vegas Raiders, which is a big deal because I kind of have the Patriots going to the playoffs this year, which is a little scary because, it's only 1 year with Mike Vrabel and it's technically still a rookie QB, even though he's in his sophomore year. I'm calling him a rookie because he didn't really have a lot of reps for me to justify. But in this game, it's a problem for both Miami and New England. And let me tell you why. Miami's coming off a very embarrassing loss. That loss to the Colts last week hurt their pride. And I don't blame them. I would be hurt too if I knew that my team did that. Like that was unbelievable for me. Now, in this game, important injuries to note, right? Because injuries always matter because that affects the shape of the game. For the Patriots, they will not have Keon White. He has an illness. He'll be out for this game. And they won't have Christian Gonzalez once again. So they're missing their top DB and they're missing a key contributor on the defensive line. That's a huge thing to note. That could actually help out the case for Tua and Tyreek, who's going to be looking to have a big game this week after what was a very quiet week for him last week. Now, questionable also is Morgan Moses for them with a foot injury. He plays their right tackle spot. And then Marte Mapu, their linebacker, he has a neck problem. Both guys are questionable. We don't know how they're going to look, if they're even going to play. Then Dolphins side, no Darren Waller once again. Hip injury still bothering him. Austin Jackson, their right tackle, he's out with a toe problem. Benito Jones, one of their key run stoppers on the D-line, he's got an oblique injury. He'll be out. And then one of their starting corners who's filling a spot this year, Storm Duck, he's out with an ankle injury. So an already thin secondary gets even thinner. They do not expect to have Jalen Wright this week or Ethan Bonner. So that's another corner down, another running back down, and they're waiting to see with Ashton Davis if he's going to be a go. But signs are pointed to he should be able to go this week with the knee injury, their safety. So Dolphins already beat up as it is going into this year. So to me, this season was going to have a really rough outlook for them. And this game might be another example of that because here's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the Patriots offense currently not looking great, but up against a defense that's also not looking great. Dolphins defense ranked 29th last week at stopping the pass. Against the Colts offense, nobody expected to boom the way they did. A rushing defense who went up against Jonathan Taylor's rushing game last week, and that's already hard enough to stop. And then in terms of getting pressure, the pressure rate, they don't get a lot of pressure as it is. So losing anybody that kind of could affect that really hurts the Dolphins' chances. The only thing they might have an advantage in is stopping the run because Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Henderson did not look great against Vegas. So we could potentially see something change there. Passing wise, Vegas' secondary did a great job of shutting down the Patriots last week. So we could potentially see a change because of the injuries in the Dolphins secondary. So I kind of had the Patriots winning this one right now, and they don't allow a lot of pressure. The May didn't get pressured a lot necessarily against Vegas. And with Miami already struggling to do that in the first place, I think he'll be fine. Maybe get sacked once or twice, but he should have a relatively clean game. Jersey stays relatively clean here. So I really do see the Patriots coming out with a victory here. Miami's going to probably go down 0-2 here, and that's a huge problem. And what I mean by, and also it's important to note, New England's getting a lot of pressure too, because Harold Landry, somebody they got from Tennessee, he had a really good game last week. 2.5 sacks, 7 QB pressures, which is the third most in the league right now, and he did that all against the Raiders, who were supposed to be a lot better on the offensive line. And he and Milton Williams together have been really good together, combining for 14 pressures on the QB, which is super significant. I think we're going to see Tua getting hit a lot again this week, and that's unfortunate, but I think it's a really serious thing we have to be ready for. Patriots probably winning this game. I'm taking New England here over Miami. San Francisco and New Orleans is the next game. That's a big game as well. That's also at 1 o'clock in New Orleans at the Superdome. Let's talk about this game a little bit. Saints looked a lot better than I thought they would against the Cardinals. Yes, they lost that game, but they were better than expected. Rattler didn't play a bad game in the first half. Second half, pretty much disappeared. 49ers case, Ray could definitely lose this game, because on paper you would think the 49ers would win this, because passing wise they were just outside the top 5 in efficiency last week against Seattle. You look at their rushing defense, their run defense was pretty freaking good. They did really well against Seattle, shut down Kenny Walker and Zach Charbonnet for the most part, and in terms of getting pressure, they were okay. They were okay at that, at least, which says that Seattle's protection got better. We look at the Saints side, and defensively, their pass defense has been better this year, which is great to know. Their rushing offense has been pretty good too. We rank about 11 right now, but I think San Francisco is not too far off as well. And then you look at the pressure rate, right? The pressure rate, the Saints did allow a lot of pressures, which is crazy because they're really beat up on the O-line, but they did pretty well. And so we have to see how that now changes with the injuries they have this week. And speaking of injuries, this game could actually have the most injuries of the week. So worth noting, George Kittle's on IR, so they don't have their leading tight end. Ayuk is still not ready to play. Jawan Jennings is questionable to play. Trent Williams is questionable to play. They're starting left tackle. And of almost important things, probably the most important, Brock Purdy's out. So the 49ers don't even have their QB. Mac Jones is set to start for the 49ers this week. If Mac Jones starts going off against the Saints, I don't know. I don't know what to think of New Orleans at that point. But who knows? Mac Jones has been sitting behind the guys for a couple years. So we'll see how he's kind of learned and settled being the backup kind of dude. And this won't be the first time we see Purdy on the IR on not playing this year. We will definitely probably not see him play next week. They're saying it's about 2 to 5 weeks for recovery here. Right now, he's guaranteed to miss 2 weeks. And then after that, we'll see if he can come back for the 3rd week or the 4th week. Hopefully not have to be out all those 5. But as of right now, Purdy definitely out this week, probably next week as well. So the 49ers are going to have to try to survive without him. In the Saints side, which is still very significant, they lost their safety, Julian Blackmon. Huge loss in the secondary. They do not have Chase Young, who has a calf injury, so they lose their top edge rusher. And then they also don't have their left guard, Trevor Penning. So they're out there. And then their right tackle, Talis Fuaga, knee injury. He's questionable to play. And even if he does, like I say, just because it is questionable and they play doesn't mean they're healthy. It means they're toughing it out. And they're not 100%. You have to be okay with that. I mean, they may not play their best because of that problem. So you can't, necessarily judge a guy for the injuries. He's playing through something that's affecting his mobility. So that's something to watch with the Saints too. Rattler kind of didn't get sacked as much as I thought he would last week, which is huge because mobility is key. And he showed he's got some mobility. With the 49ers situation, I don't know if I can realistically go with them just because Mac Jones is playing QB. I hate putting it that way. I think if they're going to win this game, they're going to be relying heavily on the shoulders of Christian McCaffrey and Brian Robinson Jr. and Ricky Pearsall. Those are the guys that they're going to have to lean on to get them this victory on offense. On defense, I think the 49ers can hold it out. They'll be fine. But they're going to have to force Rattler to sling it. And if he can get the ball going well against the secondary, I think it's a bad omen for the 49ers. I'm going to go with San Francisco. but I'm extremely cautious about this game. If you are a bettor and you're going to bet on this game, do not bet on the 49ers spread. Keep a very close eye on what that spread looks like for the New Orleans. Because if it's like 7.5, 8.5, I would absolutely opt for the Saints in that game, in that situation. So keep a very close eye on that if you're a bettor. In terms of actually just going money line, picking a game here, like I'm picking the game, I'm going with the 49ers. It's going to be really close, I think, because of those injuries. Let's stay in the 1 o'clock window. We're going to look at Buffalo and New York. Not the Giants, the Jets. Buffalo's going to play the Jets at MetLife, and I can't wait for this game because it's what I've been telling people all week. Justin Fields and his Jets team had the best loss I've ever seen in the Jets history. They fought hard against the Steelers, and they didn't look awful, which is a very good thing. I know the defense kind of looked a little bit weaker, but to me, the defense really wasn't necessarily a liability when you're going up against a guy who had all the time in the world to throw. I was very blown away by how Rodgers played. That's just an unlucky game for the Jets. And also, they could have won the game. It was just a great hit by Jalen Ramsey. 2 great plays kind of negated everything, and that sucked. But for the Jets, I'm really liking what they're doing so far. And Buffalo, they're literally the best team in the NFL right now, better than Philly. So I got to give them credit there too. Buffalo could do some damage here too. And a lot of people are probably going to pick Buffalo to win this game, and I don't blame them. But it's very important to note here, the Jets' passing offense was literally top 5 in terms of efficiency last week because of the Steelers game. Their run game was top 10 in efficiency because of last week. The only thing that really sucked for them last week was the secondary wasn't as strong, and they weren't getting a lot of pressure. Once again, this is going to be a continuing issue this year for the Jets. They got to get more pressure. And this is a week where you really need to get pressure on Josh Allen, because if you don't get pressure on him, you are going to regret it. Now, keep in mind, I love what Buffalo has done so far. But against a Baltimore offense that plays eerily similar to how Justin Fields plays, we don't know how Buffalo is going to be able to handle this now. They have to game plan for Fields if they're game planning for Jackson, because Fields can run, but he also has that ability to lead you on in the play action style where he's getting close to line of scrimmage and you make your linebackers jump up, and now you've got a window open to a receiver who wasn't open before. So because of that mobile aspect, it creates tough decisions and will create more open windows and blown coverages because guys are attacking to prevent him from running and leaving a guy wide open. And not only that, Fields is now hitting his target. So that's even more concerning. So for Buffalo, they got to have a good game plan this week to prevent that. And I think there's a very good chance the Jets could win this game. But it's also important, let's note injuries, because injuries always matter. Key one, the Bills will not have Ed Oliver, ankle injury. They will also have Shaq Thompson, Tre'Davious White, Teron Johnson, and Jordan Hancock. All of those guys on the defensive side are questionable to play. I expect probably one of these guys to not play, but the other guys I do expect. I don't know which one it is that's not going to play. I'm leaning towards Tre'Davious White, but I can't say that in good faith unless we get the full report, which will probably be coming out as of Sunday morning, and this will be coming out on Sunday morning but taped on Saturday night, so be aware of that. And then the Jets, they will not have Kenny Nwanwu, who is one of their depth running backs, and also Josh Reynolds, one of their starting receivers. He's out with a hamstring problem. And questionable to play will be their rookie tight end Mason Taylor with his ankle problem that's been nagging him, and then Michael Carter II, the corner, shoulder problem. He's questionable. So we'll keep an eye on those. But for the most part, really the biggest loss mentioned here is Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver being out really eliminates a lot of the run problems that we would see that the Jets could potentially have. So that means Breece Hall might have a better day than we think, because he is the key to how good that run defense is. If he's out, the Jets have a better chance of running inside with Breece. So I could see a lot more with Breece and Braylon getting more attention because of that. So the Jets definitely could have a game here. And if there's a game the Bills are going to lose that they shouldn't lose, it's probably this one in New York. I hate to say it, I'm kind of leaning Jets here. I'm not crazy like that, but I do see a world where the Jets win this game. I do see it. I'm just terrified of the secondary doing their job. Can they lock down this week, and have they learned their lessons from facing Pittsburgh last week? I'm going Buffalo. Buffalo's going to win. It's going to be a very, razor-thin game, but Buffalo wins. And maybe this doesn't happen later on this season when they face off again in Buffalo. But right now I have Buffalo winning, despite not having Ed Oliver. I think it's going to be a great game on the ground for the Jets. I think it'll be great on the ground, but that's it. Through the air, offense is going to be great for the Jets, but the Bills' offense is going to be just better. And that's what's going to win them the game. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. So I'm going to go Bills there. Let's go look at another 1 o'clock game here. Seattle, Pittsburgh. This will be in Pittsburgh at Acrisure Stadium. And I gotta say, I was very impressed with Pittsburgh last week. Like we said, we were talking about the Jets game, how Aaron Rodgers did against them. I was very impressed. Then I look at the Seahawks, and I'm kind of disappointed. Darnold obviously did not play to my standard of expectation. I expected Seattle to win the opening game, and that just did not happen. So Seattle is going to start the year 0-1. The question is, will it be 2 losses in a row? Well, let's take a look. Let's just look at what happened last week, and let's look at how the numbers shaked out. So, in terms of passing efficiency, right? The Pittsburgh passing offense was ranked number 10. So, oddly enough, the Jets' pass efficiency was higher than the Steelers, despite the fact that the Steelers won the game and Rodgers threw for 4 touchdowns. Interesting. The secondary for Seattle had a lot of issues against Brock Purdy, who was banged up, and then a really banged up receiving group. So that's a little terrifying for me. So that indicates to me Rodgers is going to have another day where he's going to get a lot of passes off. He's going to be able to throw the ball pretty easily. So that's something to watch there. I think that's a huge advantage for Pittsburgh. That should pretty much win them the game. In terms of the rushing aspect, they didn't really do great on the ground last week, like I said about Seattle. San Francisco did a great job of slowing down Kenny Walker, Zach Charbonnet for the most part, deterring them. So we're going to see how Pittsburgh kind of handles that. But with Derek Harmon missing once again another week of football, I think they're going to have a lot of the same tales of last week. So this is definitely going to be a better week for Kenny and Zach, but I'm not 100% sold that that's going to be what helps them win the game potentially. I don't think there's a real advantage there. And then in terms of just getting pressure, Pittsburgh was literally in the backfield almost every play last week. They were doing a really good job getting to Justin and forcing him to have to roll, and that's a big deal. But Justin got better at throwing on the run, and that's a great thing too. Now also with the Seahawks, not the 49ers. With the Seahawks, the biggest issue there was protection problems. Now I mentioned that San Francisco didn't get a lot of pressure, but when they did get pressure, they forced a lot of mistakes out of Darnold, which again, we know these problems have been going on since back in his days with New York and the Jets. So for this Steelers defense, you have to get the pressure. You get after Darnold, you're going to get there. They did an excellent job of that last week against the Jets. Will they replicate it again against Seattle? I really do think so. I'm going Pittsburgh here. Seattle's going to go 0-2 to start the year. And here's something else interesting to note. Last week's game plan, the Seahawks called run plays an extra 11% higher over expected. They called plays 11% higher rate than what was expected of them in the game plan, which is the third highest mark among among teams who played in week 1. So they were trying to run the ball a lot more last week. That was their game plan. I don't think they're going to try to do that this week. They're going to have to try and beat them through the air. So expect them to try and exploit the air more than with the ground. Although I do think they're probably going to push their luck and see, because it depends on how much they value Kenny Walker to like literally run through this defense. It's up to them. It's what the game plan is decided by McDonald. But I do have Pittsburgh winning this game at home. Let's move to the Rams and the Titans. This should put us into the last game of the 1 o'clock window, I believe, here. So the Rams at the Titans. This is a big game for the Titans because they lost a close one last week against Denver. And honestly, it should have been a lot different. They should have definitely lost that game by a wider margin, and they didn't. So in Tennessee's defense, they just got to have a better week. Just really, to be honest with you, they got it. I will say their secondary played very well against Bo Nix in that Denver offense, which was very good last year, but they were eliminating a lot of opportunities for Bo in the passing game. Got 2 picks off of him and made him make some mistakes here. However, you're not going up against Bo Nix. You're going up against Matthew Stafford, a veteran, potential, I know it's an argument, but like on the fence, Hall of Famer statistically. We'll see with that. But they ranked number 7 last week overall in defensive efficiency, the Titans secondary against the pass. And then now for the Rams, they ranked 12th last week against a Houston team that really defensively looked really good. So they did really well against a defensive team that supposedly improved, but they held them down pretty well. But despite that, the Rams still got some good passing in, and that was an important factor. So we'll see how they do against the Titans here. I do expect them to do better. Run game. Kyron Williams pretty much got shut down for the most part last week. There was a couple run game issues for them. So for the Rams, this is going to be an important game to get that run game back and established. The Titans here may not have a great run game, only because I think they have an injury to one of their defensive linemen who's supposed to be a big run stopper. And that person would be T'Vondre Sweat, their big name, the nose tackle in the middle. He's got an ankle injury. He's out this week, as well as J.C. Latham, their right tackle. And on the Rams side, they're probably not going to have Steve Avila, their left guard. I heard both their guards are hurt, may not play. And Colby Parkinson, their tight end, also hurt. And I mean, all the way around, the Titans and Rams are kind of beat up in some key positions, so that could definitely level out the game, to be fair. But I look at the pressure rate, and the pressure is the key here. The Rams did not allow as much pressure as some teams, but they were kind of like a middle of the road overall in terms of pressure rate allowed. With the Titans' sake, they didn't get a lot of pressure. 29th in the league. They didn't get a lot of pressure on Bo Nix last week. And that's why the Broncos paid so much for their O-line, because they're very good. The Rams' O-line is going to be banged up. Does that change the outcome is the question. Now, you ask me how this could potentially go. The weak spot for the Titans is going to be at that left tackle spot. Dan Moore had a pretty rough week. 8 pressures, 2 sacks his first game as a Titan, and 4 of those allowed pressures happened in under 2.5 seconds. That was against the Broncos defense, which edge rushing wise, they're pretty good. But for this sake, for this game, this could be a very bad matchup against Jared Verse, who's been one of the young bright spots in the Rams defense. So I could potentially see the Rams exploiting that matchup a lot, creating a lot of pressure for Cam Ward. And as a result, the Rams will win this game in Tennessee. So I got the Rams. Let's go to 4 o'clock window. There's a few games here in this 4 o'clock window. Let's look at the first one being Carolina at Arizona. We're going to the desert here. 4:05 Eastern time. Both teams didn't look stellar last week. Carolina worse than Arizona. Although Arizona got their victory, the offense just looked a little off. Carolina, we don't know what was up with Bryce Young last week. I've got no answers for you. I expected him to be able to show that second half form in the first game of the season, and we just didn't get to see that. So I don't know if that means Jacksonville's defense was just so good, or we might have seen a regression now in Bryce Young already to start the season. It's too early to tell. But what's important to note is the efficiencies. We have to go and look at those numbers first. There's no advantage in terms of the matchup between the Cardinals' offensive efficiency passing-wise and the defensive side for the Panthers. So pass defense, middle of the road. Pass offense, middle of the road. So it's pretty much a standstill there. I do expect Arizona to get some good plays in. And that's important because we need to see Kyler use more of that vertical game. Marvin Harrison looks a lot better. They're getting more out of their offense, which is great. Their ground game looked stellar last week. Ended up ranking top 10 in the league in efficiency. And I think that's going to be a huge key for them to take down Carolina, because Carolina was 30th. They could not stop Travis Etienne. What makes you think they're going to stop James Conner and Trey Benson? Fair point. Then the pressure rate. Carolina did not get a lot of pressure on Trevor Lawrence last week, which is really stunning. But for Arizona's sake, we look at Arizona, they didn't allow a lot of pressure either. They didn't allow the Saints to get a lot of pressure, which was huge too. So if they can continue that trend this week, this should be a no-brainer. This should be a Cardinals victory by ease, like the easiest for them. So we're going to see how that could potentially change as the game unfolds. But I do think right now Cardinals have an easy victory here. Let's just make sure with the injuries that maybe this could be a little bit different. On the Cardinals side, there's really not many injuries to worry about. I know Tip Raymond and Cody Simon are both going to be out for this game, but Will Hernandez is questionable and Blake Gillikin's also questionable, their punter. I do expect both to play. Not 100% saying they're going to play, but I do expect them to. And for the Panthers, they're not going to have Tershawn Wharton, one of their starting defensive linemen. So it's adding fuel to the fire here of what I'm saying about Carolina potentially losing this game. And Ike Mekwonu, who missed last week with an illness, he's questionable to play as well this week. We do not know if he's going to play. I would hope he plays, but there's no guarantee. And if he does come back, that does definitely affect the pressure because he pretty much blocks for Bryce Young's blind side. So hopefully he does play because that could hopefully help them do better. But I have Arizona winning regardless. Let's go to Indianapolis for Denver and the Colts. Broncos Colts, 4:05 Eastern as well. Really good game from Daniel Jones, who shocked the world last week with that victory over Miami. And Denver, not so strong game, offensively at least. So let's talk about the big matchup here, what people are going to be focusing on. No, it's not Bo Nix against the Colts defense. It's actually Daniel Jones against the Broncos defense. Can you make that make sense? Were we really going to be talking about that this week? I mean, if the game didn't happen last week the way it did, I don't think we'd be talking about this with Daniel Jones, but it really is fascinating. The Colts passing efficiency after last week is number 2 in the league. One game though. Remember that. One game. The defense for the Broncos is number 3. So you're going up against probably the toughest secondary you're going to face this season for the Colts. And you need to come out and ball. And that means you got to also prevent a lot of pressure. And this is the key thing here. You cannot allow a lot of pressure on Daniel Jones because if that happens, you're going to see the same problems show up again. You cannot let that happen. That has to be the emphasis of this O-line. Keep Danny clean if you want to win. And passing-wise, it's going to be a hard day for the Colts. I do think the run game could be the advantage here if the run defense for the Broncos isn't as strong, if you guys get what I mean. So if they're really banged up in that aspect, which we'll take a look at that real quick, I would say that. But they don't have Nate Atkins. They don't have Dre Greenlaw. That's really it for the Broncos. Same injuries. The Colts-wise, they're losing 2 corners this week, Jalen Jones and Charvarius Ward. Those 2 injuries could actually prove to be super crucial to winning this game because those 2 guys would be doing really well for the Colts. So it's unfortunate. And then Tyler Goodson's questionable, their depth running back, and Laiatu Latu, their edge rusher, has a hamstring problem. He's questionable to go. He doesn't go, there's really no pressure coming from Indianapolis, which means Bo Nix is all day. And when you got a secondary that's missing 2 key corners, that also plays a huge factor. So overall, I think Denver comes out of this victorious, knowing these injuries ahead of time now. But let's keep looking here. Overall rushing efficiency, Denver did pretty good on the ground with Dobbins and Harvey. And they're going up against a defense last week that didn't really do a good job of stopping the run, despite the score. And in terms of getting pressure, Bo Nix was literally clean the entire game, for the most part. He was clean. He wasn't sacked, really. Under a lot of pressure, sure. Under a decent amount of pressure, sure. But he was not hit very often. And same thing can be said for the opposite side, for the Miami. Miami didn't really get hit a lot, but the Colts didn't get a lot of pressure, and that's why. So not a lot of pressure from the Colts, but the secondary was in lockdown mode, and that's really what helped them win. But with those 2 injuries to 2 key corners, that changes the outlook of this game. So I do have Denver winning this because of that reason. So give me Denver and Indy. Then we go to the main game here of the week. Philly, Kansas City, game of the week, 4:25 Eastern in Kansas City. One team 1-0, the other one 0-1. It's a Super Bowl rematch game. Philly, passing-wise, looked pretty okay. Pretty okay. Obviously, we saw complaints about A.J. Brown not getting a lot of attention last week. Pretty evident why. When you got zone coverage run all the time, you're not going to have a lot of open windows. Even if you're a route technician, even if you're a speedster, it's really hard to get open on zone coverage because they're just passing you off between windows. And you'd have to hit the pass perfectly between windows. And if they're tight windows, it makes it even harder. So I'm not saying it's because Jalen Hurts isn't capable. I'm saying it's the safest thing to do is to not throw into those tight contested spots if you aren't sure you can pinpoint it and nail it. If you feel like you're going to be off on your target, don't risk it. Like that would be a safer play. If you got someone else open that's more surefire and it's not an emergency situation, take it. That's it. And you're going to see a lot of that now with quarterback play in the NFL. With the Eagles situation, 13th in pass efficiency, The defense for the Chiefs against a Chargers offense, which I had no idea we were going to play that good. Chiefs defense did not look great pass-wise. 30th in the league right now, pass defense. That gives a huge advantage to Philly. And Philly's offense is supposed to be more dangerous and lethal passing-wise than the Chargers was. So we really have to be concerned about what is this Eagles team going to look like out there. Can they do the same thing and exploit Kansas City further? And it's not like the passing game for the Chiefs looked very good. It didn't. So that's a huge factor too. Mahomes and that passing offense did not look great. So they're going to have to clean up. I hope they cleaned up a lot of things this week because this is a game you can't mess up. Now you're going to the run game. Kansas City did really good on the ground. That is one thing. On the ground, Pacheco looked great, and so did the rest of the running back room. Philly didn't necessarily do a great job stopping the run, but not having Jalen Carter because he spit on somebody definitely plays a factor. But with him back this week, that should change things. I think that's going to be a tougher game for Kansas City to have to run here, but it doesn't mean they still won't find success. And in terms of pressure, Mahomes wasn't under a lot of pressure. He was pretty clean most of these games. Sixth highest pressure rate. Sixth lowest pressure rate allowed, which is great. And then the Eagles weren't really getting a lot of pressure. Like, they were like middle of the pack. They were doing okay, like league average, but they weren't getting the pressure they were hoping for. And that's why they went and added more people. They just went and got Zadarius Smith during the week. So that's kind of why they did it. They weren't getting the pressure they were hoping for, and now they're going to try to increase it by adding him into the equation. Kansas City, they need a rebound game. This is their rebound game. They got to try. And do I think they come out victorious? It all depends on injuries. And they don't have Xavier Worthy or Jalen Royals, two guys who are supposed to start for each other. What I mean by that is, if Xavier Worthy was out, Royals would be the fill-in guy. But because Royals is also hurt, that means you're going to see more attention again for, you guessed it, Tyquan Thornton and Juju Smith-Schuster. Both those guys are going to get a lot more attention this week, so we have to keep an eye on those two. On the Eagles side, they are still banged up, and it's still important to note that. Will Shipley, out. That's their backup running back. Dallas Goedert, their starting tight end, out with a knee injury. Their right tackle, Cam Williams, he's out with a shoulder injury. So now we got multiple levels of potential issues here on the offensive side that could affect the volatility of the actual Eagles offense. There may be less options, less things to worry about necessarily. So you have to keep a really close eye on that. I know these guys seem more like depth guys, but I'm telling you the truth. They all play an important part in this game. And what I'm going to tell you now is that for Philly, I think they're going to come out winning this. I can see it. Lacking the couple key playmakers is definitely going to play a role in this loss. So for the Chiefs, I see them losing this game. I got the Eagles winning in Arrowhead. I think it's very clear. Then we get to the Sunday night game, 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time. Atlanta, Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Vikings looking to make it 2-0. Falcons looking to rebound from a really tough loss against Tampa just last week. They really should have won that game against Tampa, but it didn't happen. It just didn't go their way. It was a rough moment for them, and I really do feel for them because I had them winning and they just did not do it. Now, important injuries to note, major ones to note. Jack Nelson, left tackle, he's going to be out for this game. Same thing with Jordan Fuller, their safety. Falcons missing two pretty important guys. Same thing with Casey Washington, one of their receivers with a concussion. He had a really good week last week when he was in the game. Became a super important asset at times, and not having him would definitely hurt them quite a bit. Questionable, though. Guys to really watch. James Pierce, one of their rotational edge rushers. He's got a groin problem. He's questionable to play. Same goes for Billy Bowman, their corner, their nickel guy. He's got a shoulder problem. On the Viking side, they will not have Christian Darrisaw, their left tackle, knee injury. Andrew Van Ginkel, their outside linebacker, he's got a concussion. He's out. And then Jeff Okuda, one of their depth corners, he's got a concussion and is out. And then questionable to play is their safety, Harrison Smith. He has an illness. I expect him to play, though. The Vikings are going to be pretty thin in some really key areas, and some really big-name players not playing is going to 100% leave the door open for the Falcons to exploit some problems here. So we're going to see if the Atlanta can get involved here and get in the game. But one thing I do want to know here is passing-wise, right? In the passing aspect, the Falcons were very good against Tampa Bay, ranked top 10 in efficiency. Ground game, not that great, but I think it's because Tampa's run defense was better than advertised. And then with the pressure rate there, they allowed a lot of pressure, which was shocking because Tampa typically doesn't get a lot of pressure. Or no, they don't usually produce a lot of sacks, but they do get quite a bit of pressure. They did do that again, and the Falcons were having to reel and work with that. But with the Vikings having the issues they have, I think that defensively, Atlanta could have a chance here. They could have a chance. Both the offensive line for the Vikings is beat up, but so is the front seven for Atlanta. So it's going to be a tick for tack game. I do think in the end we're probably going to see a victory here for Atlanta. I think this is the week Atlanta finally gets a victory because they realize the Vikings don't realize this isn't the Bears. The Falcons are way different than the Bears. So I really do think that this is a game where Penix finally gets this victory, gets Atlanta back on track to like, okay, now we're in a groove. Let's get to the next week. Let's start stacking wins. Let's start piling them up. This is the game that gets them on track. I think this has to be that game. So Vikings will lose this game. Atlanta wins it. Sunday Night Football. Let's go to Houston for Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Tampa, Houston, big game. Buccaneers, Texans. Both teams, Tampa being 1-0, Houston being 0-1 in a really tough game last week against the Rams. Buccaneers barely winning a game against the Atlanta that they really should have won. But let's look at the different side of that. Tampa's still got an offensive line they're still shuffling around because due to injuries, including the Tristan Wirfs, which has really shaken up the O-line. They got some injury problems there to still keep an eye on. We're still waiting on more on that injury report, but it's not looking like they're going to get Wirfs or Godwin this week. It's going to be the same situation once again. So that could definitely potentially impact the offensive performance for Tampa against a Houston defense that played much better than they did last season. Passing-wise, Baker was under a lot of pressure last week, and that was why they shuffled the O-line around. They took their center, moved him to left tackle, took their guard, moved him to center, and then took their fill-in left tackle and moved him to left guard. So like that's kind of the shuffling they did to try to remedy the situation. No, they took their backup left guard and started him at guard. So Michael Jordan started, who they called it from the practice squad. They took Bredesen, their starting left guard, moved him to center, and they took their starting center, Graham Barton, and moved him to left tackle. This way to kind of, I guess, balance out the line a little bit in terms of size. But I didn't love that move, and it definitely affected it because Baker was under pressure 40.5% of his dropbacks in week 1. So Atlanta got a lot of pressure on him, which was the second highest pressure rate in a game since last season. And it ended up forcing Baker to have to scramble a few times. I think 3 times, in fact, he had to scramble. So that was a huge deal. And if Houston can replicate that kind of pressure, this could be a different game for Houston. Now, passing-wise, 11th in passing efficiency, despite the fact Baker didn't have a great passing game last week. Houston, on the other hand, pass defense was like middle of the road, 19-20. So they're definitely looking to have a better week, but against guys like Mike Evans, Ibuka, Kate Otten, it could be a little bit of a tougher situation for them. On the ground, Tampa's ground game, better than it's been in recent years, but they didn't necessarily play to the level I at least expected of them against Atlanta. They ended up finishing out about 14th in efficiency after week 1, and Houston's run defense was very good at stopping Kyren, so I expect a similar trend to continue here against Tampa Bay. They're going to probably end up shutting down Bucky quite a bit, and you'll see more touches for Rashad and Tucker. And then the pressure rate. Tampa allowed a lot of pressure because of these injuries, and they ended up ranking 23rd. Texans are ranked middle of the road at 16 when it comes to pressure rate and how they did against the Rams just last week. So this is definitely an opportunity for them to improve and get that done. If there's one game I think Tampa loses, it could be this game. But I do think in the end, Tampa probably comes out of it barely. And I think it's going to be a similar situation to last week. Really slow start. Houston gets ahead. Second half, they come out, get on a roll, barely win it by a field goal. I think it's going to be a continuing trend until the offense gets healthier and they get things more in line. So I think they're probably going to end up beating Houston, but it won't be easy. Might be a really slow start for them, but they'll come out victorious. But yes, I do see Houston winning this as well. It could happen either way. But I am going with Tampa. And then finally, the last game of the week. Monday night, 10 p.m. Eastern time. It's on the West Coast. That's why it's 10. The Chargers are going to the Raiders. 2 1-0 teams in an AFC West rivalry game. They're going to be at Allegiant in Vegas. And the Chargers offense is ranked number 1 in efficiency in the league. But The more interesting part is that the Raiders are ranked 10th in passing efficiency defense and how they do against the pass game. They do very well. Granted, this is a big advantage they say for the Chargers, but I think you really look at how the Raiders secondary looked against the Patriots, which this Patriots offense is supposed to be so different, so much more dangerous. I got a lot of respect for the Raiders. This was a game that they played well out of their mind. And here's a good example of what's made them so much more difficult. And this is why they could potentially do really well at stopping the run. Let me tell you why. Stopping Hampton's not going to be an easy task. Stopping Najee isn't going to be an easy task, but this is what I'm noticing. The Raiders converted 66 of their 70 tackle attempts in week 1. That means their missed tackle rate was at 5.7%, and they only allowed 10 extra yards off of those 4 missed tackles. That's a very, very good number. In fact, that percentage is the lowest in the league through week 1. So being able to finish your tackles, not miss them, is huge, and that's what the Raiders have to continue that trend this week against a very shifty Chargers offense. Every guy can make you miss, and that's what you have to worry about as a Raiders defensive coordinator. You need your guys to play like they did last week, lock down, wrap correctly, square up, launch yourself, and make sure that you're square and almost like a spear motion, leading with your shoulder, take them in, secure, wrap, fall down, spin them down, whatever you got to do. Get them down to the ground, do it cleanly, and do not, for the love of everything, don't hip drop. Please don't hip drop. Now, in this game, here's some couple key things to keep in mind as well. The run game for the Chargers, despite the fact Janty did pretty well in week 1, they ranked 29th in rush efficiency, and the Chargers' run defense is ranked 27th. So, not a great day for the Chargers last week in terms of stopping the run, and the Raiders haven't really run the ball well. They didn't run the ball well against the Patriots, apparently. So this is a really good chance for the Raiders to exploit this weakness and do well, but there's also a chance the Chargers could still slow them down quite a bit. So we'll see how Janty does. Remember, he's just a rookie. Things happen. Both teams are working with rookie running backs here. And then the pressure rate. Yeah, the Raiders did better with pressure recently this season so far compared to previous seasons, but they're still ranked 21st. They still let some things go against Patriots that just shouldn't have happened, and the Chargers were really struggling getting pressure. They really missed Joey Bosa, so that definitely affects a lot of things for them. I mean, we could definitely see a world where the Chargers come out of this with way more sacks than anticipated, but I'm still of the mindset that the Raiders are probably going to get some big stops here. And because of how well the Raiders played, I'm of the mindset that I think the Chargers can lose this game. I think the Chargers could lose. It's very, very possible. But if it just depends on the opposite way, which I don't have the numbers for. I want to see how the Raiders' passing offense looked and how the Chargers' pass defense looked. And I can't really get that metric right now. But I do believe that the Raiders passing-wise weren't as, I would say, stellar or, mind-blowing, but they still played well, and the Chargers were very good at limiting Mahomes in the vertical game. I think that's just adding more fuel to the idea that the Chargers win. I think that's just very possible. The only way I think the Raiders come out of this victorious is if Janty has a really good game. And if Janty doesn't have a good game, I think the Raiders are cooked. So yeah, that's what I'm going with. I'm going to go with the Chargers taking down the Raiders in Vegas. I was thinking about going Raiders here, but it's too much of a risk to ask Janty to carry this offense here. So I'm going to go with LA. Raiders go 1-1. Chargers start the year 2-0. Really good start for them. And that's going to do it for our week 2 storylines, week 2 matchups, and predictions. So, mind you, we went 9-5 last week. It's always a rough go in week 1, but I promise you, I think it's probably going to be a better week this week. We're going to find out some more clarity on, was it just a fluke or was it for real? That's kind of what week 2 is about, and the next couple weeks are going to be about. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, make sure you've liked, subscribed, turn on notifications so you don't miss any more videos. And don't forget, Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we do live stream marathons of every NFL game. We cover 3 full games a day on Sundays. So make sure you are there for all of those. We'll be releasing those as of this morning. After you've watched this video, make sure to check out the socials. That's where you'll find out what videos, which games we'll be covering. So make sure to tune in then. As always, I'm Brian Mansell, And I hope you guys enjoy this week 2 slate of games. Until next time, take care.